I have 5:15, so we will start this evening's school board meeting. Please stand and recite the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Certainly welcome any visitors that we have here tonight. I will mention that Mr. Aaron Rogers is on the phone, so he is present with the rest of the board members tonight. I was in Wisconsin over the weekend, okay? I have an excuse.
Well, Aaron is a Packers fan, I think,
Yeah.
so I think that actually works out.
Okay, I gotta move on. All right. I don't believe we have any public communication. Are there any conflict of interest that anyone noticed in the agenda? Okay, then we'll move to our consent agenda. This is where we'll consider several things, but if there's something specifically you'd like to pull off and talk about, we can do that. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Roger. Second by Dan. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving down to our regular meeting. Items A, recognition, B, correspondence. I don't believe we have either of those. Item C, reports. Is there anyone here from the student council to report tonight? I see not. Then we'll move on to the superintendent reports. Dr. Leck.
Thank you. You have my written report. I will skim through some of these areas. I'm certainly available for questions on any of them, however. Health and safety updates, things continue to be decreasing from our high point a few weeks ago, and actually that's decreased even more early this week. From the report that I gave you was from 11/10, which was our last date of school last week. School calendar planning, we are meeting on December 6th. With our calendar committee, and we're again going to be planning to recommend a 2-year calendar to the board, hopefully at your December meeting. We'll have that completed and ready to go. And just a reminder here, and this is something I'll continue to bring up because the days to hours legislation was predicated on a few things. And we were very happy legislatively that we were given that flexibility, but our legislative intent was very clear, that we don't decrease student contact days. That's not the intent. The intent is to provide flexibility for that time. And just I feel like we want to continue to bring that up so we can reinforce that 175 days is still the standard that we want to meet, although it's not statutory any longer. But I think it's still important that as a board and board members change, we want to continue to reinforce that 175-day is still the legislative intent. We certainly don't want to be in a position where legislators decide they want to remove that flexibility because school districts are no longer meeting that expectation. So in terms of the superintendent evaluation, I've just outlined the process for you again, just to make sure that is clear when you act on that later. This wasn't a request, but as part of study council conversations I was having with other superintendents in study council schools, I've provided for you a comparison of summer school compensation, just to give you a benchmark idea of where how we benchmark ourselves to other districts. And I think what you'll see is I was very pleased with that report that we compensate very well comparatively, and I think that's a position that we want to continue to hold. Summer school is certainly a position that we want to continue to find individuals, and we want to compensate well. So I was happy to see that. It certainly reinforced that we compensate those positions well, but we want to continue that as also. The 360 surveys, one of the things that we did when I came here 9 years ago, we put out if you're not familiar with 360 surveys, what they are is they provide an opportunity to gather perceptual data, for leaders to gather perceptual data from those that they supervise. In a school setting, of course, that would be all the staff that work under a building principal that have direct connection to an administrator in the building. And we've used 360s in, I think, the first 4 or 5 years prior to transitioning to the Marzano leadership. 360s, we did a 360 evaluation for every building administrator in the district. When we transitioned to Marzano, those became options for principals, and as I talked throughout the evaluative process with principals, they missed that. At least a lot of them missed that feedback that they were getting from staff in their buildings. And so we have returned the 360s. We're doing them on rotation, so in every building it's done once every 3 years. And there's 2 that I use that are specifically designed for building principals. It's the Educational Leadership Profile and 21st Century Administrator. I've linked those so you can have a chance to see what those look like. So procedurally how that works is I've digitized all of these. They're in SurveyMonkeys. So we send out this SurveyMonkey link to principals to send out to staff. Staff complete, they have about 7 to 10 days to complete those. I take that information, I feed it into a spreadsheet. You've seen, I've linked to one of those examples there so you can see how that all flows out. Building principals have a chance to look at that. I send out a self-reflection. It's usually a very simple self-reflection, but it guides discussion. And so the building principal would take that compiled 360 information, that self-reflection, and then that would be part of a larger dialogue that we would have as part of the evaluative process. So a 360 is not an evaluation, but it does inform the conversations that we have that inform the evaluation as well. But I wanted to share that a little bit about something different that we're doing with the 360s, and you can see how that all works out in the schedule. The special session, I provided a little bit of information to you when when we published all of the board documents. I updated that earlier today once we saw a little bit more of what was finalized through the special session. Just want to touch on the bills related to education at least a little bit. One thing I did want to reference too, a great deal of appreciation for our legislators. As I shared out, this is a very expeditious process that we went through with the special session. Things moved very fast. And I have to say that our legislators were very responsive, and I'm appreciative of that as I shared perspective on different bills, and because amendments happen very quickly. And so as I shared perspective, they were very responsive. Now that doesn't mean that, I get my way. I share my job is to share perspective. It's their job to say, well, how does this feed into the larger picture? And but I can say that in every instance I was heard, and I think that's what's important. But again, very appreciative for what our local legislators have done, and this was a tough time to be responsive, and they were very willing to do that, so I appreciate it. Just a few primary bills that I feel we need to talk about for you at least to be aware of. Very quickly, 1505 was augmented the CTE match grant. Now, to my understanding, if you add up all of the requests, that's around 113 million. So it's not all, but it added 18 million to that 70 million that was provided last session. So every dollar that's added is a greater chance for our application to be approved. So we're certainly appreciative of 1505. 1507, a lot of conversation around 1507. 1507 initially, the initial bill had an articulated curriculum for cybersecurity, K through 12, which in itself is certainly not a bad concept. It's a concept that I support. The problem with 1507 is it skirted around what is typically the process to add graduation requirements and curriculum requirements. And I'm glad they did what they did. It's very ambitious, and I think it's something that schools and the Department of Public Instruction needs to consider long term. a bill in special session probably wasn't the way to do it. You want to make sure that there's a good dialogue, there's debate, that these decisions have huge ramifications. Schools have to have the capacity to implement, and this did not do that. And so essentially the bill was amended out to say that we need to study it and there needs to be a plan in place so this can be done as any graduation requirement would be done. I think what's challenging about a bill like 1507 is the concept itself is good. And it's someplace we need to go. We need to have additional focus on cybersecurity and coding. I don't think you'd find a lot of educators that would say that isn't the case. But we want to make sure that it's done, that there's capacity for our teachers to be able to do it, and that if it's added as a graduation requirement, there's an ability to implement that. It certainly looks different in Jamestown than it would look in Grenora, where staffing may not exist to immediately implement something like this. We could have made it work, but there's a lot of schools that are smaller that don't have the same capacity. And so that's 1507. 1508, outside of, 1508 and 1511 are the two topics, or the culmination of two topics that had an awful lot of interest in the special session. That relates to 1508. 1508 relates to critical race theory. 1511 relates to vaccination requirements. In terms of critical race theory, there were quite a few bills, but only one came out of the delayed bills committee related to critical race theory. And I think what's the most important to note about 1508 is it's extremely specific, and it defines what critical race theory is, how 1508 is to be defined and considered. Okay, so what it says is the bill states that each school district and public school shall ensure instruction of its curriculum is factual, objective, and aligned to K-12 state content standards. You've already seen through a couple pieces of board education earlier this year that is what we do, and that's what every school does to some degree. They may not have the same processes that we have, but they do the same thing. You heard from the Department of Public Instruction that talked about how those content standards are created and the level of input that various stakeholders have in the process. And so I think that piece is, I think, very clear. The second piece that's pretty clear is it prohibits the use of critical race theory, and what I think is important, it codifies the definition of critical race theory, and it's very specific. It states that that the definition that's prohibited is that it's a theory that racism is not merely the product of learned individual bias or prejudice, but that racism is systemically embedded in American society and the American legal system to facilitate racial inequality. So that's what is prohibited. That definition is prohibited. What I think is also really important is that what does this not mean? So the passage of 1508, so it's already been signed, it's already enacted, it essentially has an emergency implementation. So what it doesn't mean, it does not mean that school districts and schools are unable to teach about equity, discrimination, civil rights. Mm-hmm. It does not mean that we can continue to do that. Those are important conversations. Equity is an important conversation that needs to continue to happen through Jamestown Public Schools and every other school district in North Dakota and across the country. So we're going to continue to provide that, have those conversations. It specifically prohibits the use of critical race theory. So really, if you consider that and the process that we've outlined through board education with the development of state standards and the process we use to turn those state standards into lessons and support, we really can expect no impact on the curriculum at JPS with the passage of this bill. But I would certainly stand for questions if there are in 1508 or critical race theory. Oh, let's be.
So since it's a very specific definition, will this change, or should it maybe change how we're reviewing curriculum when we're, looking at new textbooks? I guess I can just see some curriculum that we might be able to use not quite having that specific of a definition. So I'm just thinking, should we maybe reevaluate the tools we're using because of this when we're reviewing that specific curriculum or textbooks?
I think the law is going to certainly have to inform the process that we use, but like I said, the district isn't going to stop teaching about equity or discrimination. Will this new definition inform us in the process and make sure? I think we want to make sure that we're following state law, but there's not a lot of textbooks that are going to come out, with that particular definition. That's not appropriate at the secondary school level.
Will the School Board Association recommend a policy to any of this, or no?
Probably not. I don't believe they will. The bill does allow for the Department of Public Instruction, if necessary, to write administrative regulations, and so that's what we would follow. If they would write administrative regulations, there may be a corresponding policy to that, but I think at this point there isn't a policy that would need adoption at this point. If the School Boards Association feels it is necessary, they would likely communicate that in the near future. Okay. 1511 just relates to vaccination requirements, and it's not just for schools, but schools are under that umbrella of who would be impacted. It basically states that we treat the COVID-19 vaccine like we do other exemptions, that we allow for other exemptions, and we can't require them without allowance of an exemption for enrollment in public school. Those exemptions already include, which are very broad. Actually, North Dakota is one of the most broad in terms of vaccination exemptions, but it's medical, religious, philosophical, and moral objections. You simply have to complete a form that outlines one of those 4 exemption areas. And I don't have a link there because it's still pretty fresh. It's not there yet. Is it there now? Oh, okay. Yeah. The last one that I outlined is 2346, and that just is the codifying the $88 per pupil for the STARS rebuild that we've talked about previously, that you already knew was coming. The last piece from my report, facility project updates. As we talked as a facility committee, we felt we wanted to take a little more time with the board to outline timelines, the specific projects that are taking place through some of these ESSER dollars that have flowed through the district. And like I said, the timelines, there's a lot of different moving parts with the different projects for a few different reasons. The high school projects, for the most part, are relatively straightforward. There's a little bit of concern related to the prefabricated metal building and making sure that it's here in time. Typically, the turnaround for that would be weeks, and now you're looking at months. And so it could be quite a while before we actually get that building, so it can so the installation process can start. So that's something we're concerned about. But in terms of price, we have a hard limit on the cost there. So that's one of the few areas that we have kind of a finite cost that we're planning around. There's a lot of variability in the other projects due to, we are only so far in the design process. So there's a little limitation there. But the high school projects, like I said, are relatively straightforward. We know that we've committed $850,000 to the health and wellness added that facility. And we have devoted, I think it's $550,000 in the capital projects plan to roofing at the high school. One thing that's good to know is that our estimates have come in quite a bit lower. We just got that today for our roofing. And so there would likely be about $200,000 that was devoted to roofs that could be used for some of these other projects. So like I said, that was just today. Usually you don't get that information. But based on what we have in place, that's what we got back from TECTA. Gustner, it gets a little bit more complicated. At the middle school, it gets even more complicated because of design. So in terms of Gustner, that's a full HVAC replacement. There's a lot of cost variability there. There's a few different factors that play into that. For one, there's ventilation tunnels in that building. That building was built in the era in which ventilation tunnels were used. Why that ever was a fad, I'm not sure, but that's how we move air in that building. And so we have to transition that from the tunnels to ductworks within the tunnels, cost variability there. There's aging boiler systems, which we all know about. Those are from 1960, I believe. And the other piece of that is, as the building was built in sections, some of the building is hot water heat, some of it is steam, and so that has to be re-engineered as well. So all of that design difference has variable cost. So we're not sure if that's going to be, 1.2 million or 2.1 million. So there's variability there, and we aren't going to know that until we get further in design. In the middle school, there's even more cost variability. I call the HVAC replacement that we're doing at the middle school kind of Frankensteining the whole facility, because these are all different systems within that have been designed to work together. And so when we're talking about remodeling, changing those systems, there really isn't an idea of what that cost is going to be. It's going to end up being how much can we get done with the amount of money that we have available. We have our wish lists of things to do, but that may not mean that we can do everything for our projected price point. So that means that we have to start looking at other projects within this whole group. That might mean maybe that $200,000 from roofing is enough to kind of even things out. Maybe there's part of the windows that we're looking at replacements. That's the other part of the middle school project, is replacing windows. Maybe we can only afford to do half of those because we want to prioritize the HVAC. And maybe we're really lucky and it's not as much as we thought. And then there's some ability to devote some of those dollars to other projects. The reality is that's probably not going to be the case. We're probably going to be looking to see what can we do for the amount of dollars that we have, as opposed to the other way around. But those are really the big projects that'll come from the high school, from Gustner Elementary, and from the middle school. So big picture, health and wellness edition, roofing, I think it's 3 sections at the high school of roof, full HVAC replacement at Gustner Elementary, HVAC replacement at the middle school, window replacement at the middle school. So those are the big rocks. There are timelines, and I've attached those timelines, and they've been previously shared. We've talked to Consolidated, and they're actually going to add some highlights in there as well, because there's some big board action related items that are going to be coming up, and we wanted to highlight those in these schedules so board members could look and say, okay, that's right, we're going to have a guaranteed price conversation in February for this project. These are going to be probably bid out in 3 different installments. We do that for a few different reasons: price control. I already mentioned that the prefabricated metal building, we want to make sure that that comes on time. So we might have to bid that earlier than other projects. We want to make sure that subcontractors that we have adequate coverage for what we need, but that they're not overextended. But and we also want to encourage our subs to have a project that they could bid to as well. So there's a lot of different factors. So there'll probably be at least 3 multiple alternatives. So lots of things happening with the projects, but that's why I think these timelines are important. So we make sure that as a board, you're understanding when things are going to happen and when you have requirements from a board perspective. Jason, did I miss anything? Diane, did I miss anything?
I do want to compliment Mike on how on top of this project he is, and how well, how well he, described to us what is happening. It was very clear to follow and very, very much on top of the situation, which I really appreciated.
Thursday, Mike was here with the engineers and the architects, and they spent the day in Jamestown looking at all the sites, the high school, the Gustner, and the middle school. So, yeah, Mike led them, so he did a great job.
That's the first step in the design process to get a sense on what our cost is actually going to be. So the last thing that I had, unless there's any questions, is just that I would like the board to consider a board retreat on January 3rd. My thought was that we would do a board education activity, so that would help inform me on what information you would like for us to plan for the next year around the areas of board education. And so I have an activity that I've created that I would guide you through. And then, of course, any other areas that the board felt they would like to discuss at a retreat as well. So with that, I'd stand for questions.
Heidi, then, okay.
Just a couple of things with that. You were describing the Gustner multi-system of different types of HVAC. Is the goal to get it like just upgrading what's there, or just getting it kind of all on one system is my first question. And then secondly, I think everyone is doing a great job, the committee, central office, and consolidated construction on, we have this money and really getting our bang for our buck, I guess you could say, for trying to stretch that money out as much as we can and getting the upgrades that our district has needed for many, many years that we've not been able to afford. So are you taking donations like Adopt a Window, or what are other things? As long as we have everything opened up for things, it feels like we really want to get as much done as we can in there.
Yeah, so good questions. I think there's two important pieces to think about when we're looking at these dollars. One is we want to be congruent with what the ESSER expenditures were designed around. That's not a requirement. We know what we're doing. We're claiming through the application, and then we're flowing through general funds. We don't have to. We could do something different. However, I think we should. I think there's an obligation ethically to be congruent with what those dollars are designed for. And if you look at the projects that are actually utilizing ESSER dollars, not all of these are. The health and wellness center, that's not an area that's specifically designed for ESSER dollars, but it's a large project that we're doing involved here. But they're all congruent with, improving air quality. So I think that's an important piece. The other important piece, I think, of this is that, I've said this before, these are generational funds, at least we hope they are. And that we want to make sure that we're making decisions that address short-term needs but have long-term implications. And I think all of these projects do that. They help us to clip the peak on our capital projects plan. And now I've already forgotten your first question.
The Gustner, the multi-system, Are we just upgrading each system, or are they just trying to get it onto one kind of uniform system?
The plan is to design a uniform system. So it would be, moving all of that into hot water would be the. I'm sure that's the intent. Maybe in the design process they'll have options for us and say, well, you could spend $2.5 million and do it this way, or 1.3 and do it this way, and then then there's a decision to make. But I think what makes the most sense is to have it uniform, if that's cost effective to do that.
Any other questions? Okay.
Just a couple with that cybersecurity bill. Since we have a class already that deals with personal finance, will it give hopefully that flexibility to incorporate it into a course we already have and meet that requirement, so we aren't messing with a lot of four-year plans? That, and then the other question was, I assume that will still allow some flexibility with storm days with that requirement. Should we have a 2009 winter or something of that nature?
Sure.
God forbid, it's not something I want. I'd like to have a winter like that, the last one.
Right. Yeah. I think we all would. So in terms of the cybersecurity, that bill was amended into essentially a study that has a long implementation window. So in the next legislative session, all of those points would be hammered out. And it went through a lot of different iterations, and it's hard for me to remember which was which and what happened at what time, because there was a lot of different things happening. But initially it was a course, then it could have been a unit, then now it's where it stands, which in my opinion it should be. It should have a dialogue from teachers and building principals and superintendents, parents, anybody, the same legislative process that happens for any other requirement. Related to your question on storm days, yes, we have flexibility to continue to do that, and that's what it's intended for. Legislators wanted that flexibility, and that's what we testified on, as we wanted that flexibility to make sure that we're maximizing. As a school district, we already go longer. We have more hours than what's required, and it's significantly so. And that's how we are able to do our early or our late starts. That's how we're able to do a early release on the last day of school. Those kinds of things. That flexibility is allowed in there. And if we had a storm day or a late start, we would be able to maximize that time. Now, we still have storm days. And the process for that is we had, in the past, had a grace day. We still honor that grace day, but it's still the intention. We have storm days for a reason. So, we want to make sure that kids are in school and that they're learning. So we still do utilize those storm days, but we do take advantage of that grace time as well, for at least for one day. And like late starts, if we have to do that, or an early release time, we would still use that flexibility as long as we don't dip under those requirements. But we're nowhere near that, because we're a half an hour over every day. It's the equivalent of about 13 school days.
Any other questions? Thank you for that report. Item D is our board education, and we have contextual competency, the SEL at secondary level, and Adam Gaylor is here, and also Ryan Hardy to share some good information for us.
So as they come up, this has been improved throughout the day as well. And so I got some resources from Mr. Hardy earlier today, and I linked those. And then we have a presentation that's also linked here, and they'll give, but you can access it. And I know you probably haven't had a chance to look at it before now, but it is in your file.
All right, thank you guys first of all for inviting us along to talk to about what we feel is a very important part of education. Math and reading and science is very important, but the social emotional learning that takes place in our building is probably just as important, if not, in my opinion, more important at times. So we have a little presentation we're talking about what we do in our buildings at the secondary level. But before we get started, one of the first things is we got a little video. Turn around and to the screen and direct your attention over there. We'll hope this works.
Social and emotional skills are the essential skills for success in school, work, and life.
Social emotional learning centers their mind and body. It reduces their emotional tension so they can be open to new content and material. We find that academic outcomes increase exponentially when students are nurtured, loved, and cared for, that we get much more out of them when we first address social emotional needs. So for us, it's actually an academic intervention and not just an emotional one.
If we expect students to be college and career ready, it's important for us to focus on these skills and competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Self-awareness is the ability to identify your emotions, to be able to tie thoughts and feelings to behaviors.
We find that self-awareness is one of the hardest things for young people, being aware of their own body space and the impact of their words and emotions on other people. So a lot of the work we do is reflective, through conflict mediation, through circles, through journaling, having them see their own impact on the world, and then how to shift that or make a different choice next time.
Self-management is the ability to self-motivate, to have self-control, to regulate one's emotions.
In the classroom, that may be a breathing exercise, or that might be counting 5 or taking a break.
So with students who don't really know how to deal with their anger or don't really know how to resolve conflict, we're giving them a tool that helps them deal with it in a less stressful way.
Social awareness is about embracing diversity, showing empathy for others. Activities might include service learning projects, addressing social justice issues. Role-playing is a great opportunity for students to address how a person might have felt in a conflict on the playground.
We're going to see if other people have had some of the very same experiences around bullying that we've had.
You're in my boat if you have a bully now.
Wow, I see a lot of people.
Relationship skills are important in project-based learning. It's the ability to work cooperatively with someone, to resolve conflict.
It's the one skill you need your whole life. You may not need calculus tomorrow, but you have to know how to work in relationship, whether it's for a coworker or a life partner. You have to know how to handle conflict and how to handle challenges.
Sometimes at recess, Hermione would come over and just start talking about us and saying mean things.
Is it your job to make Danae's job at school hard?
No, I know it's a form of bullying, and sometimes I'll say sorry to her.
So you choose to be someone's ally and make a better choice.
Responsible decision-making is considering the well-being for self and others. It's evaluating the consequences for various behaviors or actions. We do this through shared agreements, one-to-one problem solving, or having students debate an issue.
If you were like, hey, Kashida, how much does an A cost in this class? And you took out your wallet and I was like, I think $50 would work. Which one of us would be corrupt in that case?
You're the one that's asking for the money?
We're truly teaching these students to be productive citizens. We're teaching them life skills. We're teaching them how to problem solve effectively. We're teaching them how to be resilient.
I think of all the billions of dollars we've spent on Title I and all these intervention programs, and when all is said and done, what do we have to show for it? I think we're trying to teach technical things instead of devoting some of the resources to teach who you are as a person. Once you know who you are, then learning becomes exciting because you've already established a discipline.
It's important for teachers and principals to understand that it can't be a binder off the shelf. It can't be something that happens from 2:15 to 4:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It has to be part of the school culture.
Giving teachers flexibility, giving them a range of skills, giving them different ways that it can look, and allowing them to take their own personality and match that to what they want in their classroom has been the best way to get authentic, true practice.
If we continue to do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we always got. Is that good enough? I don't think it's good enough for the 21st century. We need to be the outliers to try things that have never been tried and see if they work. What are we waiting for?
So that video, we started with that video because it's going to touch a little bit of what we're going to talk about that's happening in our buildings, from the competencies to what we're trying to do, the culture we're trying to build, and how we're trying to positively affect our students each and every day. As you can see on this slide, the goal of SEL in schools, support the whole child, create that positive environment where kids and adults thrive and work together in harmony towards a common goal. Whether it's 7 mindsets, which I'll talk about, or second step, which we also have here at the middle school, or Newsella at the high school, they're all research-based curriculum that we're utilizing in our schools, and they're based on the Castle competencies you can see up there, and they talked about that in the video: self-management, self-awareness, decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So all those competencies are what is based on our curriculum we're using within our schools at this time. So at the middle school, our Tier 1 social emotional learning that we're using, we have 7 mindsets. Second step, classroom guidance, when our counselors are going into every grade level and doing different units. And then also our health class. We have 7th and 8th grade health. They have it quarterly, 2 quarters a year. The other 2 quarters are in Phi-Ed. 1 year, though, when they're in the middle school, is more the physical side of things. But then the second year is all strictly social and emotional. So they're getting quite a bit of that in the health class as well. Tier 2, our counselors do small groups, whether it be Y-Tri groups or families living in separate settings groups, homework help groups, things like that. And then also just weekly individual counseling sessions with those students that we know need that support, that additional support. They might not have it at home, and we're here for them. And then the Tier 3 is something we started this year, and that's the village therapy service. We're contracted through the village, and I'll discuss that a little bit more as we go on. But those are the 3 different tiers and the support we're providing our students right now for social and emotional learning. So 7 mindsets, a little about that. We've started that, 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was. There's 10 targets of social emotional learning competencies for students. 5 of those were the Castle ones that we discussed earlier, but they also added resilience, growth mindset, empathy, culture competence, and hope. Okay, those are all part of the 7 mindsets. During their research for the 7 mindsets, they identified 28 common characteristics of happiness and achievement, and those are the building blocks for the 7 mindsets curriculum. Those are all used. So each mindset will have about 4 of those characteristics built within it. So what are the mindsets that we cover? Everything is possible, passion first, we are connected, 100% accountable, attitude of gratitude, live to give, and the time is now. And before I move on to the second steps, but 7 mindsets we've had here for a while. We teach it in either prime time, a homeroom for those that aren't familiar, or J time, which is the last 20 minutes where they come back together, a couple days a week. There's lessons that come with this. They have up-to-date videos, and it really spurs discussion. The students and the teachers will watch a video, and there's guiding discussion questions to go along with it, and just carry that conversation. And then the nice thing is just when you see the different language that you can use throughout the district or out the school. I know it even carries up to the high school sometimes, some of the common language. So that's the way we incorporate 7 mindsets into our building, and just getting that information out in front of our children, having those discussions. For example, every day we do announcements. I get an email every day with a morning mindset, and we read that before announcements and just really get kids talking and thinking and living it. Second step is something we just introduced in our school this year. The second step has been down in the elementary, I don't know, for a couple of years now, a few years. And our counselors were looking for another way to reach our kids and provide support to our kids as we're seeing more social emotional needs coming into the building. So our counselors took this upon themselves to integrate second step into 6th grade classrooms. So 1 time per week, they go into 6th grade classrooms and do a wonderful job. It's similar to 7 mindsets, just some more different speaking points. You can see there's 4 units up on the board that they cover: mindsets and goals, recognizing bullying and harassment, thoughts, emotions, and decisions. And the other unit, last unit, is managing relationships and social conflict. What they like about this is once again, the lessons are put together for them. They're interactive. They're up and moving. They're collaborative. The kids are engaged. It's not a sit and get. And they've had some very good discussions in the 6th grade classroom, and they truly enjoy this. And I should back up. A lot of this information that I'm giving, I'm not going to take full credit for. I relied on my counseling staff to provide a lot of this stuff too, because they're in the thick of it, and they're doing a fantastic job. So I want to thank them for this as well. Now on to the JMS Village therapy service, which we just started this year. We get a counselor that comes from out of town on Thursday, so 1 day per week. However, if we don't have school on Thursday, this counselor has been awesome. They adjust and they come to a different day to our building. So we make sure we get them 1 day per week. Our counselors currently seeing 10 students either weekly or bi-weekly. They see roughly 7 kids per day when they're here. Now, if they have an intake meeting, that may adjust the schedule a little bit. It eats up a chunk of their time. But on a day where they don't have an intake meeting, they're seeing about 7 kids a day. We currently have 8 students on a wait list. So right now, our counselor doesn't have time to meet with these students. We'll see these students. These 8 students will get a chance if and when the current students are dismissed. However, unfortunately, there's not any immediate plans to dismiss any of the students they're already seeing. So we're concerned that the wait list will just continue to grow just due to the lack of time. Overall, the process has been smooth and very successful. We didn't know what to expect, and it's something that it's gone great. Families have been open and receptive. That's one thing you worry about. Are they going to come in? Are they going to do the paperwork? Are they going to do the intake? That hasn't been a deterrence at all. Families are coming in. They're happy that we're able to help provide support within the school building, because you may or may not know, trying to get help outside the schools, if even more difficult. But overall, it's been great to have opportunities, and my hope is we can continue to grow as we see the need and the success that it's showing right now. Now I can sit back and relax. It's all you.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Ryan. So Ryan set things up pretty well. I'm just going to go through my chunk fairly quickly. We were doing 7 mindsets for quite a while. This year we made a switch to a resource called Newzella or Newzla. That's a combination of literacy strategy and our social emotional piece. I'll talk a little bit more about that. That's in our advisory, which traditionally was 5 days a week and now is 1 day a week. Last year we did not have advisory at all, and we were instead kind of embedding more of those relationship touch points into our block classes that we had. So we've done a few different things with that. We're evaluating the success of those, and our site-based leadership team gives us feedback on that advisory content. So it's a work in progress, I guess I could say, for this year, but I'll talk more about that. The other thing that we're currently doing with our CTE classes is we're working on career-ready practices. So when you look at those 5 CASEL elements, nobody can look at those and say, I wouldn't want those people, working with me at Bank Forward if they possess those skills, or UJ or Collins. These are just universal skills that kids develop and mature and need to practice. And so we try to do that in all of our courses, but specifically right now in our CTE courses, those teachers are wrestling with a requirement from the state that's a good thing. It's just something new to us to give students feedback on those career-ready practices. And the state picked 5 of those for them to start with. And so if students are in a CTE class, by the end of the semester, we'll have given them some feedback according to those career-ready practices at least one time this semester, and we hope to increase that then in second semester. It's actually an add-on in Power School, so we're kind of excited about that as an opportunity to help inform students' practice and give them instruction in some of those social emotional skills, but with more of a career focus to it. We also have our consistent behavior expectations, and we piggybacked off the middle school in setting those expectations a few years ago. We use those to help coach and guide students in those relationship skills and self-management. Our health class also has a social emotional focus, and that's a requirement for graduation. And then we have individual counseling services and as well as classroom guidance like the middle school does. At Tier 2, we have a mixture of small group, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and then a lot of individualized counseling services, as I'm sure Gail can empathize with. And then this year we changed our discipline matrix to our discipline and problem-solving matrix, and what we've done with that is it's always been a conversation and an educational piece. There are consequences, and the consequences are largely all the same. It's just in addition to that, we want to do additional problem solving so that, and I think that's true across all levels, that we're educating them on how we want to see things done for them and for their success. We also use the village for Tier 3 intervention. We have lots of students as well as the middle school that have IEPs with specific social emotional skills. We've started this year a Check and Connect program, which is a research-based program, and then we collaborate on the other end of the continuum too with juvenile court and some outside support services for some of our students at that Tier 3 level. So we've been using News ELA, which is a literacy-based program that has a social emotional component. So here's just a quick example. And again, like Ryan said, a lot of what these resources we're pulling from are because we have great people that are behind this work. Caroline Thompson is the one that picks some of the articles each week and makes sure that teachers are up on how to get those out to students in advisory and guiding them in that process, and our counselors help put together a lot of this information for you guys tonight as well. But this is an example, just talking about grit, resilience, and an article that students would read and be able to interact with. This Newsella resource also follows the CASEL framework, so those 5 competencies are embedded in throughout their social emotional articles that they have access to. They're all engaging and high interest for teens. It actually has an algorithm that adapts the reading level for students. So based on the comprehension kind of questions that they have over time, it's not like it instantly happens, but the students have to log into the platform, and it does adjust it so that all students are getting the same content. It just adapts to their reading level, and it's kind of in that zone of proximal development. So what I'm trying to say is just I'm maybe going to challenge them a little bit, but not so much that they're at a frustrational level when they're reading it. So we also, several years ago, did a sources of strength training, and that's a message that's remained consistent and a value we have as a school when we're picking these resources. We want things that are going to spread messages of hope, strength, and resilience, not things that are sad and shocking and that sort of thing. We're trying to stay with that positive, inspiring standpoint. This is aligned with our literacy goal, and it's easy to sync with our Schoology classes and distribute that info to our students. Since this school year started, we've got about 2,500 articles that have been read during advisory, so that's gives us at least a little bit of a metric of how we're doing with that. And in addition, we can see some data around literacy with that same component. This is also a resource that's available in some of our content areas as well, with ELA, science, and social studies. Our counselors did a great job this fall through advisory and gathering some student data. We had about 481 responses and a lot of different challenges that were identified from that student survey. Just to kind of synthesize it down, areas that we want to focus on first, 41.2% of students indicated some level of anxiety. 41.4% indicated self-confidence, issues with self-confidence. Academic areas that the counseling team would like to address is time management and then study skills as well. So with that, our counselors are working on and developing some programs. Right now, they're starting with our Blue Jay Academy, which they've got some lessons ready to roll even this week, and one of our special education classrooms to get some of that small group classroom guidance out there. And then also based on that needs assessment that they pulled. They're looking at a couple other evidence-based programs. I've recently passed on a recommendation for yoga ed, which is actually a mindfulness and physical education kind of opportunity that we'd be kind of excited to pilot and get some training in. And then our Sources of Strength program is something that we're trying to get revived again as well with the counseling support. Check and Connect is a Tier 3 intervention. So if when we talk about those tiers, hopefully you guys know what we're talking about. 80% or all students in Tier 1, this is what all kids get. And then about 15% of students at Tier 2, this is what they get. And then about 5% of students at Tier 3, this is what they might receive for services. So Check and Connect is a research-based intervention. We had a training this summer. We actually funded that through a special education grant, and Heidi Bedeau was a great support in getting that going for us. We trained 10 mentors this summer. Of those 10, we have 4 actively engaged. We're waiting on 6 families that we haven't gotten the permission for them and that full process done. So like Ryan mentioned, sometimes that intake process can be the obstacle. We're trying to figure out how to overcome that. We actually, Mindy Skunberg, one of our counselors, is working on a partnership with UJ to try to get more mentors trained. The challenge with this program is this is not an overnight success kind of program. This is a 2 or 3 year relationship of checking in on a weekly basis and helping students set goals, and very well researched and very successful program. Takes a lot of fidelity and commitment, and we're hoping that partnership with UJ will help us be able to expand that as well. The other thing that we're working on, again related to some special education funds, is called EWIMS. It's a Early Warning Intervention Management System, another acronym for us. And EWIMS is basically an early warning system so that we know how to catch kids before they're struggling too much. And high school with the credit-bearing nature, things can snowball fairly quickly on a student if they're struggling, and we want to be able to use the best data that we can to make sure we're intervening with students. So for Check and Connect, we started because it's a 2 to 3 year program. We started just looking at freshmen and sophomores and assigning the students with the highest need in that area. The Village, we also are 1 day per week, and it's also on Thursdays. We have a different counselor that comes in for that. It's going very well. It wasn't hard for us to identify students. We identified about 40 that would benefit from that. At this time, we prioritized from that original list of 40, and then prioritized 19 students that have been referred. 12 are in, and then with 3 of those referrals just happening in the last week. And so that, again, that intake process, but once they've started that, they're seeing around the same 7-8 students a day. And we found that some of our students that were recommended were already receiving outside counseling services, so that's good news. And they've got those providers lined up, and they're not going to, step on each other and double up on therapy services. So I guess to kind of wrap it up before we answer any questions you might have, these are skills that I think we could all agree that we want for our kids and our future citizens to have in their lives and in their livelihoods and in future employment. And they're things that we know we need to talk about with students and practice, and we're trying to get better at that every day.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Gail?
Just a little bit, how are the mentors chosen? Are they looking for someone, I really think Check and Connect is a wonderful program. And the fact that you can do it with fidelity is also something that's wonderful. So how are those mentors chosen so that they'll have that fidelity and that ability to maintain that relationship?
It was a special ed grant that funded that, so we trained all of our special ed strategists, case managers, and then counselors this year. Our goal, and a couple from Blue Jay Academy, our goal was not so much that they would be consistent mentors in the future, but they are the points of contact that are closest to kids that could help make referrals for the future. We also chose people who did not have the responsibility of an advisory. And so if they didn't have an advisory responsibility, they had a mentoring responsibility. And just from an equity standpoint with that. And the other reason, we were capped at 15, we collaborated with Valley City, who sent some people over. So 10 was the magic number for this year. And we think we can get those resources lined up again so that we could train potentially people from the community or, maybe future educators from University of Jamestown.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to add, something I'm so passionate about this, just really thank you and thank all your counseling staff and your teachers and everyone who's come together for this. It just makes my heart kind of sore. Thank you.
Roger.
I got two questions, one for Ryan and then one for Adam there. For Adam first, the village family counselors, you say if there's kids that are dealing with a counselor outside the school system, is there collaboration or communication between those two counselors? So if a child's getting help outside the system, does that counselor that's coming to the school know what's going on outside?
No, that's completely separate. Would be completely separate, but our counselors often do have a release of information and are able to coordinate and understand the services that are happening outside of school. They can't get, we're not getting any level of detail that we don't need to know. We're just seeing how we can support and maybe reinforce some of the same coping strategies or strategies that they're using in therapy in the school environment too. So a lot of times we get that info through those releases. And as part of the process with the village, then that's the same process. They're external providers, so we have to have a release of information to exchange any info if the families are comfortable with that.
Okay. And then Ryan, with the 8 that are on a waiting list, is there communication with our counselors with those kids on a regular basis so that they're not on an island by themselves?
Yeah, they try to meet with them as much as they can to their ability. Sometimes they don't have the outside their pay grade per se, I guess, to provide the proper support the kids need. We support the best of our ability within the building, and that's why they're on the waiting list to hopefully meet with that clinical counselor when a spot opens up. But they like Adam said, between the village counselor and our counselor, there's constant communication. They're holding meetings whenever possible just to get feedback so we're on the same page and using the same language and same, like Adam said, coping strategies.
We got Diane and Heidi and Dan.
I just wanted to thank you for coming and giving us some of the best board education that we could have. And also it's going out to the public. And I think a lot of our public isn't aware of how involved you are with this social emotional education. So thank you for coming, and I did learn quite a bit. One thing I wanted to ask about the Tier 3. I could see what Mr. Hardy's concern is that waiting list will keep growing as these students aren't dismissed by group therapy or by village therapy. Do you know if they're intending to expand across the state, or can we tap into another service that provides this same type of thing? Because I can see that things aren't going to get any better as these kids move on, and they need this help. Instead of being on a waiting list, they need this help. So what can we do about those waiting lists?
Well, one thing is that, and Gail will know, is it's not just village, it's statewide, it's community-wide, that just providers. There's not enough providers, not enough time. As far as when it comes to village, if we can somehow be creative with what we do and find funding to help support more days, the council, I know our council would love to be here more often. It's just a matter of what can we do as a school district to provide, and a community to provide support for our students.
Yeah, and I can add to that too. Initially we started with the Village Family Services as part of our ESSER, our learning loss plan, and we picked a dollar amount. And that dollar amount provided us 3 days. If we had been able to find a counselor that was local, we would have had 4 days with that amount. We pay some for travel and those kinds of things. But really that just comes down to a funding level support. So if you think $15,000 per day commitment. But then that additional travel time now, because we don't have providers accessible in town, which I think is part of the other conversation that we're having. But yeah, it's really about a funding commitment. And this was where we started.
I would just add that right now too, I mean, the counseling profession is seeing many of the same issues that teaching profession is. They're very short. A lot of people are leaving the profession because of stress, money issues. There's not a lot of difference in that. That's why it becomes really hard as a school counselor to provide even referrals out. Like you said, it isn't uncommon to have many, many weeks out, or kids who are released from Prairie who need counseling, and there's several weeks between some of those services starting. That's not at all unusual. So they're seeing some of those same strains. People go and spend, they're not getting enough return. Counselors are paid really poorly in the state too. And if we value that service, we're gonna have to reward it. That's just the way it is.
Okay. Heidi, then Dan.
Thank you for coming today, and I think some of the numbers probably aren't surprising to anyone. It's not any different across, our other areas. Obviously, I think the numbers you shared and the waiting list caught the board's attention, of course, and with the questions surrounding it. What is the role of the South Central Human Service Center and then the needs of these students? Can you tell me how that all fits together? Because we've hired our 3-day week, right? Is it one middle school, one high school, one?
That's the village.
The village, yep, for grade school. So we've brought on those services for the students. What is the role of the South Central Human Service Center and the services they provide?
I guess I can't, counseling department do a better job explaining it, but my understanding, it comes down to time and space for people to get support. But like I said, Gail might be able to answer that one a little better than I can.
Yeah, having still just done this up until this year to other things, the Human Service Center role changed dramatically from what it used to be. Everyone could get services there. Then they became more of just a crisis. They do intake, and then from that intake, they might be referred out to other places in the community. And it's more income-based. People who can't access services in other ways than are seen by the Human Service Center. So that role changed. I would think it was I was still at the high school when that role started to change. But they do more intake, and then for people who don't have access to other forms of insurance or other kinds of things. Because they're just like us. They had much more need than they had time and people to meet those needs. And it's just, if you're thinking of becoming a counselor, please. It's the most wonderful, rewarding profession, but we need more of them. And it became, trying to find those services is really difficult. And I know our school counselors will spend hours on the phone working with parents to get that to happen.
Okay. Dan?
Regarding the needs assessment, was that a one-time measurement, or is that something that you do periodically?
I know that Chelsea Granzi previously, when she was trying to establish some of the small group topics and focus areas, did a similar survey, but this is the first time we've done one at this level, and kind of helped them determine some of those priorities for that. So nothing scientific about it, all student self-reported data.
I would piggyback. We do that every other year or so, and then I would refer back to our student engagement survey too. We can gather a lot of that similar data on the student that we do yearly. I know that's a state requirement, and that's out on the dashboard, and quite frankly, really impressed with our results. But you can pick out things here or there, little pockets of need.
Any other questions? Jason?
So, yeah, I mean, the consensus is that everything we're short in everything, people, money, the whole spectrum. And of course, we're all concerned about the waiting list and those things. One thing that would break my heart too would be is if the household would be the roadblock to intake. What leverage does the school have, if any, or what extra steps are taken in that case if it's a really severe need? Do we give it a one shot and that's it? Or I guess I'm really concerned about those kids where we could provide services for them, but the home is not allowing it.
If I could maybe talk to a little bit of that too. I think one of the values of a program like the Village is that it is happening in school. Sometimes the roadblock is when families are required to do that outside of their own schedules. And so essentially we're providing those services while kids are in school. Which I think for the most part, that's the largest derailer that we see, is that it happens in the school setting. And for us with the Village, it also happens, we think about the school year, and I've talked about this before when we went through this and approved the agreement, but the Village actually provides that 12 months. So our students are going to be able to see services in the summer months as well. And so then we might see a decrease because there's different levels of responsibility to get kids to and from services. But I think as long as we're providing them in school, and I'll defer now to Adam and Ryan, but I would guess we don't see a lot of people not taking advantage because the process is really pretty easy for families the intake process is easy and the service providing is easy.
I guess I'll just piggyback. We have yet to run into that. Our counselors do a good job. They actually bring the parent in and they walk them through the paperwork themselves with them here. So they don't say, here's the paperwork, good luck. But I think it's you run into households that are road barriers no matter what you're dealing with in education. And we have a wonderful staff here at Jamestown Public Schools that doesn't take no easily. And they're going to find resources and then other ideas. And the biggest thing is educate families that this is good for your child. And your top priority is our top priority, and that's the child. So we just educate them on the resources we have and don't take no for an answer. Now, obviously, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But we're going to look for resources to provide and just continue to educate them why it's beneficial that they take advantage of the resources we can provide.
Jason?
And I'm not sure how to ask this question either, but thinking outside the box, are there options, legal barriers, whatever, to identify people in the community who may be licensed yet retired in counseling to pair them up with, my mom's a retired social worker. I'm not volunteering her, but is that even an option? Is that even an option for us to pursue, where we find someone and maybe line them up with one student that they come to the school to meet with once a week? I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know the legal parameters or whatever, but.
I can actually address that slightly. I know that the counselors are aware of other public people that do that would fall under the insurance of the parent, and they do offer that information to the parents that says, hey, if you want to go outside and have help through this service, here's a contact, and it can run through your insurance, so it's available, so they're not just dropped and left.
And I think, Jason, too, what you're talking about also fits into the Check and Connect. As that program expands, that would probably be a place where that may be, what you're talking about, may be the appropriate avenue.
Any other questions? What a great program, and we think it's awesome, you and your staff and what you're doing, and it's doing nothing but helping kids, and that's awesome.
And I just want to reiterate, we're so thankful for the day that we get. So thank you, board. Thank you, Community of Jamestown, for putting our kids first, because yes, we have a waiting list, but we still get one more day than we had last year, so thank you very much.
Okay.
And the additional counseling resources between the
Yes.
high school and middle school, that's been much appreciated and helps us reach more kids.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, our next item E is old business. We don't have any old business. Item F is any new business. Under new business, we have item 1, activities, nothing today. Item 2, buildings and grounds, nothing today. Item 3, curriculum assessment and instruction, nothing today. Item 4, finance. A, we have the general fund balance, which is there for information, but item B is the monthly financial reports to which we need to get approval. Motion by Roger, second by Gail. The motion is to approve the monthly financial reports. Any discussion? Any discussion? Aaron?
Did you vote on the monthly financials or just a motion and a second? Did you vote?
No, we're voting right now.
Oh, I thought you moved on. I'm sorry. I misheard you. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, feel free to join us anytime. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Item 5, personnel, is the approval of the superintendent's evaluation. And as what's explained, it's either, for these different categories, it's either satisfactory or unsatisfactory. Those are the options that we have. I did meet personally with the superintendent. We went over the results, and just want you to know, and he said in his notes that all the comments were reviewed, discussed, and he takes them to heart. He appreciates that actually when you do put some comments in. I mean, that is helpful. You don't have to fill it up, but those kind of comments the superintendent pointed out was very helpful. So we'll just go through these one at a time. And again, the vote will be for satisfactory or unsatisfactory. The first, section 1, is goal and vision setting.
Mr. President, I would move for section 1 a satisfactory rating of goals and vision setting at the rating of 3.51.
Okay, we have a motion by Roger. Is there a second? Second by Jason to have a rating of satisfactory for the goal and vision setting. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries. Do we need roll call for that? No. No. Do we normally do roll call for it? I better pay it. Okay, no, I better listen to Sally, she knows. I guess we are going to bring this back to a roll call vote.
Okay, section 1, Diane Hansen. Yes. Roger Hout.
Yes.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Gail Nelson. Yes. Dan Tweeten.
Yes.
Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Greg Allen.
Yes.
And Melissa Gleason. Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, section 2, board relations.
I move for a satisfactory ranking on section 2 of the evaluation board relations.
Okay, we have a motion by Jason. Is there a second? Second by Roger to rate the board relations as satisfactory. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Roger Hout.
Yes.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Gail Nelson. Dan Tweeten. Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Greg Allen.
Yes.
Melissa Gleason. And Diane Hansen. Motion passes 8-0.
Item 3 is the human resource management.
Mr. President, I would move we have a satisfactory rating on Section 3, Human Resource and Management at the rating of 3.62.
We have a motion from Roger to approve the human resource management rating as satisfactory. Do we have a second? Second by Dan. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Gail Nelson. Dan Tweeten. Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Greg Allen.
Yes.
Melissa Gleason. Diane Hansen. And Roger Hout.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Section 4 is the curriculum and student support services, and I'd entertain a motion.
I would move that we give a satisfactory rating to Section 4 Curriculum and Student Support Services.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to have a rating of satisfactory for curriculum and student support services. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Gail Nelson. Dan Tweeten. Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Greg Allen.
Yes.
Melissa Gleason. Diane Hansen. And Roger Hout.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Section 5 is community relations.
Mr. President, I would move we have a satisfactory rating on in Section 5, Community Relations.
We have a motion, second by Gail, to have a rating of satisfactory for community relations. Any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Gail Nelson. Dan Tweeten. Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Greg Allen.
Yes.
Melissa Gleason. Diane Hansen. Roger Hout.
Yes.
And Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Final item, Section 6, is operations and resource management. I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I would move we have a satisfactory rating on Section 6, Operations and Resource Management.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second by Gail to have a rating of satisfactory for operations and resource management. Any questions or any comments? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Dan Tweeten. Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Greg Allen.
Yes.
Melissa Gleason. Diane Hansen. Roger Hout.
Yes.
Jason Rohr.
Yes.
And Gail Nelson. Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, that completes the approval of the superintendent's evaluation. Congratulations on the full satisfactory rating on all of the categories. I will add one other point that came up during our discussions is that the superintendent is, and we discussed it, we have a great board. We have diversity of thought and feelings, but yet we are all attempting to do what is right for this district, and the superintendent is very pleased in working with every one of the board members. So I just wanted to express that. He wouldn't say that probably, but that came out in our discussions, and we appreciate all of your input. Okay, item 6. Still under new business is policy and procedures. We don't have anything there. 7, tuition, nothing there. Nothing under other. Roman numeral 4 is meetings to be scheduled. A is the Health Insurance Committee meeting on Monday, December 13th, 2021 at 3:45 p.m. in the multipurpose room in the middle school. And then item B will be the regular school board meeting on Monday, December 20th at 5:15 here in the Thompson Community Room in the middle school. Certainly, if you have any other items that you would like brought up or meetings, just let us know and we'll review that. The superintendent's evaluation, section 2, board relations, and section 5, community relations. With that, yes. Should we try for a picture next time? Is everyone going to be here for December 20th, as far as we know? Is anyone not planning? Okay. Okay, so we will be looking for December 20th to do pictures, and we'll send out a little reminder about that. Thank you, Amy. And it's dress as you wish, right? Okay, within reason. Okay, with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you for a good meeting.